Good morning, everybody. We're just waiting for everybody to sign in, so we're just going to give it another minute. So feel free to grab a coffee, and we'll start in just a minute. So just another message for folks. We're just waiting for a few more people to sign in. So we'll take a couple more minutes to just let people check in, and then we'll get started on our e-summit. All right, we are going to get started. Welcome everybody to Project Learning Tree Canada's first ever e-summit. Our Green Jobs e-summit today is an exciting event where we're bringing together voices from across Canada to share in green job experiences from youth that have participated in green jobs, as well as professionals that are currently working in green jobs later this afternoon. I just want to thank everybody for attending today. The summit was originally intended to be an in-person event held in Ottawa this week, but due to the circumstances, we took quick action and made this available online, which actually even improves and increases our reach to inspire more youth to consider jobs in the great outdoors. So I want to thank you everybody for attending. We have a really great lineup of young speakers this morning to really talk about their experiences over the past few summers. So my name is Jess Kaknevicius. I am the VP of Community Engagement at Project Learning Tree Canada, which is an initiative of the Sustainable Forestry Initiative. I've been working here for about 2 years, just over 2 years. And this morning session is really focused on kicking off green jobs in the forest and conservation sector, featuring several youth that have participated in our Green Jobs program to date. Before I get into kind of our programming and what we've achieved over the past few years, I also just want to take this opportunity to introduce you to the rest of our team, some of who you'll meet today and some who you may have heard of through various communications through our programming over the past few years. All of these people have really contributed to the successes at Project Learning Tree Canada, as well as the successes of the e-summit that you're all tuned into right now. Really, it's a great team that's really enthusiastic, delivering on things like our Green Jobs programming, our mentorship programs, our youth network initiatives, and our Indigenous relations and youth relations. So I just want to thank all of the team for their contributions today. Don't hesitate to reach out to any of us at any point if you're looking at that job going, oh, that sounds like an interesting job, I want to learn more. We're all about trying to build green career pathways, and I encourage you to learn more from people that are actually working in those pathways. So Project Learning Tree Canada, an initiative of the Sustainable Forestry Initiative, believes in a world that values and benefits from sustainably managed forests and the natural world. We believe that forests give us many benefits, including health, products, places to recreate, cultural experiences, as well as really important career opportunities, as you'll learn about today. Over the past 2 years, Project Learning Tree Canada has helped to support over 2,000 positions in green jobs across the country. This is in large part to our diverse network of employers and has provided really important experiences for youth in the outdoors, including conservation and research, forest management, Indigenous forest-based programs, education, ecosystem and wildlife management, and provincial and territorial parks. We are so excited to have been able to place over 2,000 students and another 500 coming this summer. These are just really important experiences to help build these career pathways for youth. Over the past 2 years, as I mentioned, over 2,000 youth have been placed in green jobs across Canada, and over 23% of those have been placed to rural youth work living in rural communities. We've also been able to achieve gender balance, as well as support over 12% of our placements to Indigenous youth. All of this is directly because of the support of our networks through the Sustainable Forestry Initiative, as well as the Canadian Parks Council, leading to over 200 employers providing positions over the past 2 summers. It's really the result of these employers and this network of collaborators that we've been able to achieve this amazing success. Now, before I turn it over to Zac, I just wanted to do a quick highlight of my own career path, because I know some of you are tuning in going, what is a green job? How do you get into a green job? And what's a typical path? I will say my path was probably not typical. I kind of fell into it when I started tree planting. It exposed me to a really diverse sector, and I really wanted to learn more about what was this all about. But I also really saw the summer work experiences as an opportunity to test out different jobs. So I did things like fisheries assistant, I worked as a stewardship intern, I also even worked as a vet assistant, just to try to see what I wanted to do. In the end, I ended up finding out education was my biggest passion, whether that was formal education working with teachers or informal education working with the public, trying to really increase the understanding of what our forests mean to us. I grew up in the city, so I didn't really understand what forests were and what they really provided us. And so being able to create those connections for everybody is something that I'm most passionate about. The one thing I didn't really expect in my career pathway was all the communications that I would be doing. So whether that's TV interviews or meeting ministers and doing podium speeches with them, I didn't really understand that this would be a big part of my job. And it's been a really interesting part of my job to be able to communicate my passions to the public. And so today, most of my job consists of developing strategic plans, looking at ways to develop programming, fundraising, as well as community engagement. But really, it's all about learning. And so I encourage all of you to consistently try to learn, broaden your prospects, broaden your interests, and really try to build your own career pathway. So now I'm going to turn it over to Zac.
Thanks, Jess. Just sharing my screen here. So hi everybody, my name is Zac Wagman and I'm the Green Jobs Manager with Project Learning Tree Canada. Before I get into this further, I just wanted to mention that we are using the Q&A function on Zoom. So as our presenters go on with their speeches, if you have any questions, feel free to submit them through the Q&A button at the bottom. It's just in the middle of your screen. I also have a green career pathway, and like Jess, I would say mine was not typical, and I think that's something that's consistent among people that work in the green job sector, is that there is no one way to get into this line of work. So I did my undergrad at the University of Ottawa, and I took a Bachelor of Science in Biology. And I was also a co-op student, so that meant I got to do a lot of different jobs during my undergrad. So I did everything from working as a teacher's assistant to a lab technician. I spent one summer in northern Alberta doing beekeeping and honeybee research. I also worked one summer with Parks Canada, and so that got me outdoors every day in their resource management team, working outdoors in the Thousand Islands National Park. So that's just in Eastern Ontario. And after graduating university, I was hired on by Sustainable Forestry Initiative as their coordinator of statistics and label use. And for the last 3 years, I've been the Green Jobs Manager with Project Learning Tree Canada. And I'm in a neat position where I had my green jobs experience, and now I get to facilitate that for all these young people right across Canada. It's really neat for me to see the passion that these young people bring to their jobs, and it's something I can definitely relate to. And after running the Green Jobs program for 1 year, we realized that we had all these different stories of young people working in Canada's conservation and forest sector. And we didn't have a way to really tell them. So last summer, we embarked on the Green Ride for Green Jobs. So from May to September of 2019, my brother and I rode wooden bikes across Canada to meet with young people who had been employed through our funding program. The idea was we would go out into the field with them, learn about their jobs, and create videos so that we could inform other young people about the green jobs opportunities that exist in Canada. And you can check out a lot of our content on our YouTube page. We've got a number of our videos that we've created from that Green Ride on there. We also met with a number of key decision makers. Here we are in Ottawa with a number of ministers in the federal government, really just driving home the point about why programs like this are so important and why, if we want to develop the next generation of forest and conservation leaders, we need to help provide more employment opportunities to these young people. And so our first speaker today is actually someone I met during the Green Ride for Green Jobs. That's Sky Jarvis. It was great to connect with you in early May of last year. And now I'll hand the floor over to you.
Okay, thank you, Zach. So the name of my presentation is called Exploring the Caribou Chilcotin Coast. And so the Caribou Chilcotin Coast is the part of BC that I worked in this summer, and where me and Zach met up in Williams Lake. So I'm a fourth year student at UBC, and I'm studying natural resource conservation. So far I've had experience in the forest industry, including my internship last summer with the Fraser Research Forest, which was a very cool experience because it was really getting to see the whole academia and research meets the forestry that I had experience with. And so it was very interesting to see how green jobs can also involve research as well as forestry and field work, and there's so many opportunities. My first picture here is me holding a lake trout, and this was taken on a very beautiful day. I wasn't actually at work yet, and yeah, it was just a gorgeous lake and just a beautiful day spent out there fishing. And that's one of the beautiful things about the Caribou Chilcotin Coast. There's a lot of nice lakes and it's super pristine. This next slide is of my team that I got to work with this summer. So it was very interesting. Three of these people, so Emmanuel in the front, he was a master's student from Ghana, and he was doing research in the forest looking at natural regeneration, so how well the trees were naturally coming in to fill in canopy gaps within the forest. And so we had 600 GPS points, and it was our job to use the GPS, go around, find the point, and then do your little survey and a plot. And so this was taken after one day where the GPS had took us down this hill into this area that a whole bunch of cows had kind of been. And so it was really wet and there was so many bugs, and we were like running around in this like swamp trying to get these numbers. And we came back up to the trucks, and just like the team that you work with outside sometimes can really like make your days fun. And we just took like 10 minutes and had a little photo shoot in the back of the work trucks. So yeah, my green job this summer really opened up a lot of connections with people, and that was really nice. My final picture, this was taken kind of in the background. You can see it's a little bit burnt and there's a lot of fireweed coming up. So this was in one of the burnt areas of the forest, and since the trees had burnt, it opened up a lot more room for the understory species, and so there's actually a lot of berries in these parts. And so when we're going around trying to decide which areas can be salvage logged and try to reclaim some of the burnt wood and see if it's merchantable, yeah, then we get to see like a bunch of these berries. And it's just really nice getting to see all the other values that you get from a forest besides just timber, and the amount of knowledge and research you can also generate in these areas makes them extremely valuable to humans. We have so much that we need to learn and so much that we want to protect as well. And yeah, that was the last of my green job.
Awesome. Thanks, Sky. I know you had mentioned earlier that you're just finishing up your undergrad at UBC. So I'm just curious what's next for you, and how will you use the experiences that you had from this summer job as you go forward?
I'm still looking for a job this summer. I have 1 semester left at UBC after, but this summer I've kind of realized with a bit of like forestry background and then a bit of this research background now and a bit of fisheries, I really want to get more into like the biology side of my degree. After my degree, I hope to register as a professional biologist with the province of BC. And so, yeah, I kind of want to get a taste of like biology now and maybe see if I can mix that with my forestry experience into
Awesome. Well, it's definitely experiences like this that help put you ahead in your career. So you're already on the right track.
Yeah.
Next up, we have Aidan, who worked as a Woodlands student with Tolko. So I'll hand it over to
Hi everyone, my name's Aidan, and I worked as a Woodlands student for Tolko. The title of my presentation is "The Forest is My Office: My Forestry Experience in Operations, Development, and Harvesting." So, to give you a little background, Tolko is a company that makes oriented strand board, which is a type of board lumber used in construction. And throughout my time at Tolko, I got to kind of get an idea of how the whole production of this comes about. So the first, next I've got 3 photos to share with you, which kind of represent some of the key aspects of my work. So the first photo we have here is just me on my company issued ATV. And it kind of gets at the idea that safety is a top priority at Tolko. So as you can see, I'm wearing my high visibility cruising vest. I've got a helmet on, I've got safety goggles, and this was definitely, you know, time and time again, it was emphasized that there was a certain amount of risk associated with the jobs we were doing. So it's always good to have the appropriate safety gear, and it's always important to have the appropriate safety gear that we need to get these jobs done. In this case, we were riding ATVs. Myself and my coworkers were riding ATVs on unimproved bush roads, which were generally pretty muddy. And there was, you know, if you weren't prepared, there were opportunities to get lost or have your ATV get stuck. Of course, we alleviated these risks by making sure that myself and my coworkers had a good idea of where we were heading beforehand, before heading out on the ATVs. And also we had wenching cables on our attached to our ATVs, which were handy for towing ATVs out of the mud when they did get stuck. Anyways, and I could go on about more examples, but I guess the key point here is that there were a lot of risks associated with my job, and safety was always in the back of my mind while working at Tolko. So this next photo I have here is of a bridge being installed on a company road. It is, it's happening on one of the roads that led out to one of the cut blocks. And this really gets at the idea that there were, even though the main goal for Tolko is to access cut blocks to chop down trees to make oriented strand board, in the process there are just so many industries which are intertwined. So, you know, beyond just cutting down trees, Tolko works with contractors who do construction projects like building roads, or, you know, engineers who put in bridges like this. And I got to witness this kind of firsthand and found it really interesting. Tolko also works with transportation companies to haul logs to the mill, and I really learned on my time at Tolko just how substantial the industry is of forestry is, and how many other industries it kind of impacts. So that's the main point from this photo. I see there's a Q&A here. I'll get to that. Anyways, the third photo I have here is of a stockpile of logs on one of the company roads. And this is obviously the main reason why Tolko operates, is to get these logs to make oriented strand board. But I guess the point I want to get on here with this photo is that the process from start to finish is really quite lengthy and substantial, and this photo is pretty early on in the process. But during my time as a Woodlands student with Tolko, I was able to kind of see the process from start to finish. So it generally starts with surveyors going out to see to find an appropriate wooded area to designate as a cut block. And afterwards, contractors are employed by Tolko to build roads out to the cut block. Afterwards, other contractors go in and they'll actually cut down the trees and pile them along the road, as you can see in this picture. After that, generally what happens is transportation companies employed by Tolko will go to the site where the trees have been cut down, and they'll actually ship them to the mill. Once the logs arrive at the mill, they'll generally wait until they've reached an adequate level of moisture. They need to dry out some before being processed by the mill and turned into OSB. And then after they've dried out sufficiently, the logs will be processed and turned into OSB, which is the final product. And then the OSB will be shipped out to retail stores, such as, you know, your hardware stores, Home Depot, Home Hardware, where contractors and you know, the average Joe can purchase OSB for their own needs. And so that really kind of wraps up the key points of my presentation.
Awesome. Aidan, I'm curious if there's any misconceptions that the public might have about some of the work that you do in forestry.
So that's a good question, Zach. And I'd say that maybe I'd say the one thing that before going into the forestry industry, I kind of thought that the industry was very bad for the environment, or that it was not that is kind of neglected the whole environmental aspect, whether it be, you know, kind of cutting down excessive amounts of trees, or not taking proper care of the sites where employees were operating on. And I'd say actually working firsthand, it kind of changed my view of this, getting the experience, because I think there are numerous processes through operations, which kind of ensure that Tolko is being environmentally friendly, or at least to a certain degree. This includes having government officials making sure that all the work is done to code, and obviously part of the code is there are environmental standards which need to be upheld by Tolko contractors. Beyond that, the replanting and reforesting was another huge operation that Tolko undertakes, and so during the early part of the summer, during tree planting season, myself and my coworkers encountered numerous tree planters who were kind of going into areas which had been cut down and planting new trees. So really working firsthand, I got to see that, yes, obviously the work that the forestry industry is having an impact on the environment, but there are also numerous safety nets in place to ensure that those environmental impacts don't go unchecked.
Mm-hmm. And that's something I would agree with. I don't come from a forestry background, and so the only thing I'd hear about forestry is what's portrayed in the news. And having been exposed to it over the last few years, it's really eye-opening how much attention and care goes into ensuring that forest management is done in a sustainable manner. You know, especially when companies are third-party certified to organizations like the SFI standards. It's just a way to keep accountability on their end, that they are doing all the important measures to ensure that there are forests now and there's forests in the future. So thanks, Aidan.
Yeah, for sure.
Now I'd like to turn it over to Daniel, who was a park ranger with BC Parks.
Okay, hey guys. As Zac introduced me, my name is Daniel Wu. I'm currently studying at McMaster University, finishing my final year of Earth and Environmental Sciences co-op with a minor in Geographic Information Systems. And yeah, in the summer of 2019, I worked as a student ranger crew lead for BC Parks. So my crew and I operated mostly on the Sunshine Coast of BC, which is immediately west of Vancouver, about a 40-minute ferry ride away. But we also did a lot of work along the Sea to Sky corridor, which is Squamish, Whistler, Pemberton, etc. So as the crew lead, I led 3 other student rangers in both day-to-day activities, as well as extended backcountry projects. And my crew was comprised of 3 super strong women who were basically capable of doing anything thrown at them. And as a crew, I think we did a lot of good work. So in this picture here, my crew and I were performing outreach with another group called Adventure Smart, who are not in the photo. Our outreach booths were situated at the trailhead of Garibaldi Provincial Park. And because it was a Saturday, hiker traffic was pretty intense. Out of all the cool and fun things we did at this job, I found outreach to be my favorite. We gave hikers information about their upcoming hike, such as distance, elevation gain, terrain types, locations of facilities, and cool vantage points. We also briefed a lot of new hikers on things they should know, such as wildlife awareness and trail etiquette, such as the pack it in, pack it out. I find it super pleasant talking to people who are really excited about their upcoming hike, or who are super stoked to have just finished their 30-kilometer round trip. And I think I feed off of that positive energy. So it's kind of addicting. Okay, so for the second photo, my crew and I were working with a conservational biologist and the Squamish Environmental Society to monitor the migration patterns of the western toad. So a little backstory is that there's been a decline in the western toad population in southern BC. And this was our monitoring effort was a part of a much bigger ongoing effort to monitor their population numbers as well as migrational patterns. With this information, BC Parks can then take preventative measures, such as closing down trails during peak migration season so that people, hikers, and whatever, they don't trample all over the toadlings. And yeah, this photo was taken in Alice Lake Provincial Park, where we did some stuff in kayaks and also got to get in the water with waders and just kind of count toadlings and see where they're at. So even though performing outreach and doing toad monitoring is fun, I think it's the sheer diversity of work that makes the student ranger position super exciting. So our duties can range from doing day work around many local parks to spending up to 7 days at the top of a mountain, building boardwalks and undertaking much bigger projects. And because of where we're located too on the Sunshine Coast, we did a lot of work with water, which means boats. One of our big backcountry projects started with a 2-hour boat ride up the Jarvis and Princess Louisa Inlet. We were surrounded by massive fjords and the views were absolutely beautiful. We also did a fair amount of work with Indigenous groups, namely the Seashell Nation, who are the Indigenous people that inhabit the lands that we did work on. I found this to be very fulfilling because we got to learn a lot about their culture and also share the role of being wardens of their land. So in this picture, it's got nothing to do with all that stuff, but this picture is after we finished building boardwalks in Taylor Meadows, and we had a lot of time to spare. So then we went for a quote unquote patrol to this really famous vantage point in Garibaldi Provincial Park called Panorama Ridge. And yeah, the views are spectacular and breathtaking. And that's honestly one of the best things about this field is that you're going to be doing work outside a lot of times, and sometimes your work might take you to really fantastic places. And that's it.
Awesome. Thanks, Daniel. So that sounds like a pretty incredible summer job, and those pictures are absolutely spectacular. I'm wondering though, I've worked in outdoor jobs and I know that some aspects can be a little bit tougher. So I'm just curious what some of the more challenging aspects of your summer job were and how you got through them.
Yeah, one of the biggest challenges is definitely on the extended backcountry trips because we're up in the middle of nowhere for upwards 7 days at a time. And the thing you have to keep in mind is even though the pictures look like we're having fun, we spend most of our days doing work. So getting down and go mucking through dirt and building boardwalks. Over time, it can be a little taxing. And when you go back to this crappy little thermarest and this really cramped tent to have to spend the night there and then eat couscous the next morning, it kind of wears at the spirit a little bit. But in the end, you just have to kind of breathe in and realize that you're doing something that not a lot of people get to do. And in the end, if it's between this and an office job and sitting at a cubicle, I'd much rather take this. So that was kind of my coping mechanism for dealing with the harder days.
Totally. All those challenges are still worth it in the end.
For sure.
Awesome. So I'll pass it over now to Kieran, who worked as a Woodlands summer student at Port Hawkesbury Paper.
Alrighty. Gwe Delosi Kieran Johnson. Hello, my name is Kieran Johnson. I'm from Eskazoni First Nation in Cape Breton, Nova Scotia. Last summer, I guess my education, I am a second-year student at the Nova Scotia Community College in the Natural Resources Environmental Technology program. Last summer, I worked with Port Hawkesbury Paper, and the title of my presentation is Getting to the Core of Old Growth. So I was the old growth person at Port Hawkesbury Paper. So in this photo here, this was one of my first few days at Port Hawkesbury Paper. I got sent to do old growth training with the Departments of Lands and Forestry here in Nova Scotia. So we had a presentation, we went out in the field, we got to actually process the cores, which I'll explain the process in just a moment. But when I heard I was doing old growth, it seems kind of easy. You know, you're taking a core out of a tree, and if you don't know what a core like really looks like, it's basically just like a straw. It looks exactly like a straw, except it's not hollow and it's just completely made out of the wood. It comes out of the middle of the tree. So it sounds like, okay, you just take it out and you just count the rings, but I actually learned there's a lot more to it than that, which I will explain. Okay, so in this photo here, I'm actually doing the last step of the process, which is counting the growth rings. But in the beginning, you have to go out to the field, you collect various kinds of data, and you gather your potential old growth cores. So after that, I would bring cores back to my office and accept potential old growth cores from other Woodlands workers as well. So they would all come to my office, and the boards in the photo, they have these little grooves in it, and they're just big enough to hold the cores in. So I would use wood glue, and I would glue down the cores, and I would, because the wood glue pushes them up a little bit, you have to pin them down with sewing pins. So after that, then I would wait for them to dry overnight, and then you have to, remove the pins, and then you have to sand them down with 3 different kinds of sanding paper, and they have to be sanded really well, because if they're not, you're going to have a very difficult time reading the growth rings, especially on the hardwood trees. So the hardwood trees, the growth rings are a lot more faint. So that is why it has to be sanded really well. And that's actually why we have to use a microscope when doing the hardwood trees especially. So after sanding them down, I would take it's the process here in the photo. You bring them right under a microscope, and you can count the rings however you like, from the bark to the middle of the tree, which is called the pith, which is what I did, or you could do it the opposite. And again, the lines are very faint, so they told us we could put a little bit of water over the cores, or a little bit of oil, and that really makes the growth rings pop out a lot more, which really helped me this summer. It was one of the best tips they could have given me. Alrighty, this photo here is one of the field days that I was out at, and all of my field days that I was out, it was extremely beautiful, and I was so fortunate. I didn't take a lot of photos. I was too busy just trying to avoid branches and trying not to trip. So yeah, I came across a few streams, and this was one of them. And I really enjoyed being in the field, just because in potential old growth forests, the forests are like really undisturbed. There's lots of moss, there's a lot of rare flowers, there's a lot of big trees that I got to see. So it was really cool. This photo here was taken at my old growth training. It was in the field day, so we did various types of training there for the old growth, and I just loved it. I did it all summer long. I loved it. I thought it was really interesting. The company, Port Hawkesbury Paper, was so supportive in my learning. I cannot thank them enough. I had such a great experience there. This job is important to me because it's important to preserve and take care of old growth forests, especially since their numbers are not as plentiful as they once may have been. It's also important to keep conservation of biodiversity in mind, because it's incredibly important. And as the other panelists have spoke about, is with sustainability. So I really stress sustainability because I think we should have the most sustainable practices, and we need to have sustainable practices that we can be proud of and that our future generations can be proud of as well. That's it for me. Walalio, thank you.
Thanks, Kieran. I'm curious, I have a two-part question. How do you know when a forest is old growth? And what was the oldest tree that you counted their rings this summer?
The oldest tree that I counted this summer was 216 years old. I'm not sure about outside of Nova Scotia if that number changes between what is considered old growth or not. But in Nova Scotia and Cape Breton, it's considered old growth if it's over 125 years old.
Wow, that's pretty incredible. So now I'd like to turn it over to Ryan, who is a camp counselor with the Grand River Conservation Authority.
Well, hey guys, my name is Ryan Brady and I'm a fourth year environmental studies student at Wilfrid Laurier University, which is in Waterloo, Ontario. Over the summer of 2019, I was lucky to work as a camp counselor for the Grand River Conservation Authority in Brantford, Ontario. The Grand River Conservation Authority, otherwise known as the GRCA, is a governing body that takes care of Ontario's Grand River watershed. Specifically, the GRCA manages water and other natural resources on behalf of 39 municipalities throughout southern Ontario. On top of protecting our natural ecosystems, the GRCA operates conservation areas and nature centers, and they're designed to educate the public about the outside world. Throughout my time as a GRCA camp counselor, I worked at Apps Mill Nature Center, which you can see here in the photo, where I had the opportunity to engage with children and teens on a daily basis. Apps Mill Nature Center offers opportunities for educational programs for local schools during the school year, but as well as summer camp programs in the summer to teach youth about the value of nature. The Nature Center is surrounded by over 200 acres of mature forests, fields, wetlands, and streams, which acted as our natural playground throughout the summer. So the photo you're seeing here is of a group of campers standing outside of the Nature Center. There we go. So on a weekly basis, my teammates and I facilitated outdoor learning opportunities for the campers that were designed to inspire them to grow passionate about the outdoors. As a child, I fell in love with nature through going up north to my family's cottage every summer. Here I learned how to fish, build nature forts, and just kind of generally love the outdoors. So I recognize that not all children have the opportunity to kind of do these things with their families and go up to their cottages and things. So I felt that it was really important as their camp counselor that I give the children the opportunity to grow inspired by nature through the natural activities that we were doing on a day-to-day basis. By teaching children to love the environment while they're young, I feel that it's likely that their passion may stay with them throughout the rest of their lives, which could potentially lead to a job in the green sector, the green environmental forestry sector. Apps Mill Nature Center has an endless supply of natural items throughout there. They actually have like a nature center building that they have things like feathers, turtle shells, snake skins, and antlers, as you can see here of me with them in the photo. The center also is home to a bunch of actual wild animals that we kind of let the children interact with on a weekly basis. So there's things like snakes, lizards, tarantulas, Madagascar hissing cockroaches. So the children would interact with these animals during these sessions that we called creature teachers, where they'd actually get to handle the animals and kind of see them firsthand. So as a camp counselor, I was responsible for taking the campers on forest adventures like nature hikes or games of scavenger hunts. I would also get to let the kids play in the nearby stream where they get the chance to catch crayfish and water bugs and learn how to skip rocks. So we would get all the campers loaded up with the big boots, and they have these nets, and they kind of march through the forest, and then yeah, we just go spend a lot of time in the stream, which they love. That was definitely the most, like, their favorite part of camp. This photo shows a special themed week where campers were encouraged to bring their own stuffed animals to camp. So as you can see, some campers and I were constructing rafts out of natural materials that we used to send their stuffed animals down the stream on. So as I'm sure you could guess, it didn't work out very well. Since it was important to the campers that they could have the most fun they could possibly have during their time at camp, we would often play field games like Capture the Flag, Octopus, and Army Tag. However, most of these games had a twist. Instead of regular versions of these games, we would try our best to incorporate themes of nature. So for example, instead of just playing a regular game of Octopus, where the kids would have to run from one side of the field to the other and avoid getting caught by the person that was it, or the octopus, we would explain the process of species migration and encourage the kids to pretend they were a migrating species like a Canada goose or a monarch butterfly while they were playing the game. So I had a really great time working as a camp counselor for the GRCA during my time last summer. And I would definitely encourage any young people listening to apply for a job like this if you're interested in working with children or just being able to be outside every day. It often didn't feel like much of a job at times. So I just wanted to say thanks for listening to my presentation, and yeah, let me know if you have any questions.
Awesome. Thanks, Ryan. We hear a lot about how kids are spending more time indoors more and more. So I'm curious if you saw a change in the kids at your camp from when they first came to camp versus when they left. Was there anything that changed over that course of time?
Yeah, it's definitely kind of interesting because on a week-to-week basis, on the Monday, you're kind of a brand new group of campers come in for the most part. So yeah, a lot of kids, it's for a lot of kids, it's pretty overwhelming. And it was a big part of our job to kind of be there as camp counselors on that first day and really try to introduce ourselves to them and see what their interests are. And because you got to remember that a lot of these kids are pretty young. So they're kind of, it's potential that other than going to school, they're really leaving their parents for some of the first times in their life for an extended period of time. So yeah, definitely as the week goes on and they get more comfortable with us as camp counselors, but as well as just the programs that we're running, and they realize like how much fun they can really have there. In terms of I'm sure a lot of kids do spend a lot of time indoors, and then our camp was an opportunity for them to get outdoors. I mean, it's hard to actually tell much of a change between what they are because I don't really know what they're like at home. But I gotta say, like, these kids really love spending time outdoors, especially playing in the forest. That's all they wanted to do. They didn't want to, like, during lunchtime, they didn't want to play soccer or play Frisbee or something. They wanted to go into the forest and they wanted to play by the stream and balance on logs. So yeah, if that sums it up for you.
That's great. Yeah, I think it's through exposing people to the outdoors that they really develop a passion for it. I think it's something that's ran through our panelists' presentations today, and something that definitely I can relate to as well. At this point, I'd like to turn it over to any questions. And Jess, you've been monitoring the Q&A as they've come through, so I'll just pass it over to you if there's any that have come through.
Yeah, so there's a couple of questions in the Q&A that the speakers have been answering, which is awesome. So you can check them out there. Ryan, there's one for you if you want to answer that directly. But just overall, what is one skill that you guys use that you really didn't expect when you first entered into your green job? So maybe we can, either someone can speak up or I'll pick on someone. How about you, Daniel? What is one skill that you use on a daily basis that you didn't expect you would?
For me, that would be preparedness. Because when you're doing work outdoors, you have to really prepare beforehand. If you trek all the way to your spot and you realize, oh, I forgot the hammer, or oh, I forgot, I don't know, some other really key piece of equipment, then that's almost like a day wasted. So you really have to be on top of that.
That's a good one. What about you, Aidan?
So I'd say in my own experience, interpersonal skills. I'm naturally a pretty introverted guy, so I tend to be better at individual activities, but during my job at Tolko, it was all a team environment. Like, you had to really get to know your coworker, because we typically worked in groups of 2 during a day, so you were always with someone else, and you kind of had to put aside your differences and get to be able to work with your coworker pretty well. And so I really ended up using a lot of interpersonal skills throughout the summer and really improving upon them.
Awesome. Anybody else?
I think, I guess it's not like a skill, but having passion really goes a long ways. Like if that's what you're into, if you like being outside, if you like seeing animals and stuff like that, then when that happens, when you have these sorts of jobs, that like that passion within you kind of makes you overlook some of the other like working outside aspects of like rain or bugs. And I think that takes you a long way to keep pursuing these sorts of experiences.
Awesome. Kieran, I'm wondering who inspired you to first explore a green career?
I can't dedicate that entirely to one person. I went to a camp, a natural resources / like traditional learning, like culture camp here in Cape Breton. It's called Nigani Abtigan, which means trailblazing. So I just started getting in. I didn't even know I liked natural resources at all until probably the 4th year in a row that I went to that camp, which is kind of, I don't know, just funny to me, because I kept going like until I couldn't go anymore. And then even then I wasn't sure what I wanted to do, but it was right in front of me the whole time. So it was that experience for the few years, and how much I just enjoyed it. And there's a bunch of presenters as well. So I think the last year, like I really listened to, kind of when I was getting older, I really listened to the presentations, and I was extremely curious and interested in everything that they were doing. So that is what's inspired me. So.
Was anyone else inspired? Yeah, Ryan.
Yeah, so for me, getting the chance to work at the Nature Center was kind of a perfect match, because I've always kind of had an interest in potentially teaching, but just working with children. And then kind of getting inspired through my education at Laurier in my environmental studies program has definitely pushed me to look for a job outdoors and in nature. I'm definitely interested in pursuing a job in this. So to have the ability to not only work close to home at the Nature Center, but to combine being able to work outdoors every day with working with children, it was just a perfect opportunity. And definitely moving forward, I like it was mentioned earlier, I can't imagine living a life working in a cubicle every day. So it's really important that I keep kind of trying to gain these experiences so I can move on with a career that allows me to be outside.
I'm curious if any of you have any ideas for if someone wanted to get into this line of work or a green job of their own, what would be a first good step that they could take to go down this pathway? And maybe I could put that to you, Jess, if you had any ideas on how we could get someone in a green career path. What would be a good first step that they could take?
For me, I would say I always started with volunteer experiences to see the different types of organizations that were out there, as well as just kind of learning more about the organizations. For me, it was always, does the organization fit with who I am? And so I would go on websites and look at who they are, what are their culture, what are the things that they're doing that actually interest me, and do a bit of digging into the background. And then I would start looking at what are some positions available. There's some really great job boards out there that have entry-level positions, including PLT Canada's job board. And then doing a bit of a skills inventory. So for me, I always suggest people think about skills that they have built throughout their lives, and it's not just skills through their careers, it's skills through their personal experiences, and really write down what really comes out from the things you've done through volunteering or through things like babysitting or delivering papers. Like there's all sorts of skills that you've actually developed in those different careers, and writing those out to understand the different things that you're good at, as well as how to match those with job postings. So for me, it was always learning about culture, learning about what my skills were, and doing a bit of digging on organizations that really helped me figure out the early entry jobs and where I wanted to start. I'm wondering for people or for the presenters, are there any valuable training opportunities or courses that you've taken to date that you would recommend for those who are looking to broaden their experiences or their skill sets?
What was the question, Jess?
If you've taken any courses or you've done any specific training that you think would be really valuable for other people to consider.
I think personally, if there's an opportunity, take it. Networking is so important, like in any line of work, but I find networking is especially important in this industry. Like for me, I've met a lot of people with Port Hawkesbury paper. I said yes to every committee I can be on, so I'm networking in various different ways. So networking for sure. And I also, if you can take any workshops and any kind of training like fire suppression or anything like chainsaw safety, just take them, say yes to everything, or get any kind of education you can. And that is my advice.
I would kind of say, like, building off that, like, I also agree that building a network or just like putting yourself out there is super important, especially when you're still a student, because you kind of have a free pass to be like, hey, I'm a student, like I'm looking to learn, and people like take you under their wing really quick, I find. So like one experience was this summer, this biologist took me under her wing, I guess, and she took me out and we were actually doing bat surveys at maternal nest colonies. So that was like super interesting experience that I would never have gotten if I didn't have my green job to put me where I was, as well as like skills to network, to like try to see like what other people are doing, what do they know, and what can they share, and how can we all learn from each other.
And how did you build those networks, Sky?
So this was a girl who I had met through the research force, actually. She was working in there at the time briefly, and then we just happened to meet a couple of weeks before she left. So it was like a very like brief kind of like, oh, like this is what you're interested in, this is what I'm interested in. And I guess it kind of just like stuck out to me because I remember this one day we were in the truck, me, her, and my coworker Candy, and she's like pointing out this bird that has like this beautiful like orange to yellow, and it's just like the most beautiful bird ever. And she's like, that's a western tanager. And I'm like, oh my god, like I want to be able to like know what that bird is, or know what that tree is, know what that shrub is, like know what you can eat, maybe like eventually with mushrooms, but like berries for now are good.
Does anyone else have any advice on networking?
Just my own personal experience, I was very fortunate to have a very great instructor at the Nova Scotia Community College. So he really gets us out on field trips and he really stresses networking. So I owe a lot of it to my teacher, where he got us out everywhere. He would tell us, okay, we're making this committee, like we're all going to be on it, it's going to be great. So I had a really excited, enthusiastic teacher, and he helped a lot with networking for sure.
I think maybe I could add that for my experience with working at the Apps Mill Nature Center, which I kind of mentioned was a part of this greater GRCA governing body, it's not that there's anything lined up at all, but I think it's kind of, it might be a good idea if there's opportunities to kind of work your way up through a green like organization, that on one hand, starting small as a camp counselor at the bottom of the barrel, as a student, I mean, I'm just trying to say that there's potential with that experience that you can maybe work your way up by gaining those connections, which is maybe what I would hope to do.
I'd also say just getting volunteer experiences is a great way to kind of get a sense of if you're interested in something in the field, and also getting experience to put on a resume. I know in my own experience, it's kind of indirect with green jobs, but I used to be an archaeology undergrad, and before I transferred to environmental sciences, and I was able to volunteer with my with the TRCA, which is the Toronto and Region Conservation Authority, in that, and it's a lot of outdoor work experience. And even though it wasn't exactly the same as forestry, there's a lot of kind of overlapping similarities in the type of work you do. So just being able to volunteer in outdoor work experiences is something which I found helpful.
So we're getting lots of questions in the Q&A, but one that's a bit outstanding. Do any of you have any experience working with Indigenous partners or communities? And if you could share a little bit about the work that you did.
So this summer, when I was working out of Meadow Lake, Saskatchewan, with Tolko, one of the things that the company did was they were kind of sponsors for the Tony Cody Summer Games, which were an Indigenous summer games held on one of the reserves in the Meadow Lake area. So that was a great opportunity to kind of, I guess, give back to the community and work with a lot of Indigenous youth through my work experience. And it was, and definitely it seems like in the forestry industry, although I don't know too much of the details, Indigenous peoples have a fair bit of say in how operations go about.
This wasn't with my green jobs per se. It was right before my green job though. I took part in this field school. It was a partnership between UBC and an island called Haida, formerly known as the Queen Charlotte Islands. And so it's this super remote island north of Vancouver Island that is the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Haida people. And so they have a very unique title case with the Crown, given their occupancy on this isolated island is kind of like undisputed. And so they have been very vocal about getting more rights to manage traditional lands and have a say in forestry, because historically it was unsustainable and there was a lot of conflict. And now you've actually seen a joint management agreement between the First Nations and both the provincial and federal governments. And moving forward, there's equal representation within this board, and they come to a consensus and give that recommendation to the minister. And so there's like one of the ways that I've seen that the government can make better and build better relationships, as well as like offering opportunities for youth like me, maybe a future forester or a future biologist, to see these new sorts of management, and to see how we can better integrate multiple social values within forests, and truly recognizing all the values that these lands have to all sorts of Canadians.
And
Before I
I
go,
can speak on, oh, sorry.
no, go ahead, Daniel.
I guess I can speak on the work that we did with the Indigenous people on the Sunshine Coast in BC. In our experience, we found that they were super welcoming and willing to share their culture with us. We had this one project where we had to go up to the top of a mountain to basically barricade off a ceremonial site from vandalism. And we could have just done that without too much briefing, but the Seashell Nation, they invited us over for half a day and gave us a very thorough seminar on the history of their people and why this site is so important to them. And I thought that was really cool, because they could have just told us to go up there and block it off and that was that. But they took their time and they made sure that we understood the importance of the site as well.
I just have one more question. Before we go on, I want to make sure all our panelists had a chance to answer. But if not, so one last question is, do you have any, and this is to the entire panel, do you have any pieces of advice that you could give to employers for how they can support future Green Jobs youth? Or I guess, what's one thing that I think maybe you could have done in terms of support if you were working in your dream job?
I can just speak, I guess, a little to myself. I know volunteering is one good way to get involved. Another one that was mentioned in the presentation was workshops and seeking out other educational experiences just outside your academic setting. But a lot of the times, or like even attending conferences, a lot of the times these activities are a couple of hundreds of dollars. And so I think if you really want to support youth, there'd be better ways to maybe like subsidize workshops for them, or subsidize conference fees, or subsidize other things like that, in addition to work experiences, to really facilitate more education with youth and really promote them to getting into these positions by being like, someone believes in you, like, here you go.
Does anybody else have any other pieces of advice for employers?
Maybe try doing more outreach in urban areas. I was born in the city and I spent most of my life in and around cities. And yeah, it turns out that I really like nature. So I feel like there might be a lot of other people who are in my shoes as well. And if employers can put out these opportunities and make them known to a greater amount of people in urban areas, who knows, there might be other people that are exactly in my position and just don't know that they really enjoy doing work in the outdoors.
So at Project Learning Tree Canada, we're also hoping to support the next generation of forest and conservation leaders. And obviously one of the ways we've done that so far is through our Green Jobs funding program. But going forward, we're expanding our services even more. We're piloting a mentorship program this spring. And so the idea is to connect young people with local professionals in their area, really to help them get a foot in the door and have someone, a professional that they can speak with and ask those questions about what it's really like to work in the sector. So stay tuned for that. There's more on the way. We also have a youth network. To Sky's point, one of the things we are doing is helping to support attendance to various conferences across the country. And so be sure to stay in touch with us, because we're always putting out different opportunities and ways that we can support your attendance at these at these events where you can grow professionally. I'd like to thank our panelists for joining us this morning. We've got a great group of speakers from right across the country. And this is just part one of our first eSummit. And I mentioned PLT Canada is offering support for young people. So if you would like to share your green job story, please write us an email or get in touch with us, because this is just the first of many e-summits to come where young people can get together and share their stories right across the country. We also have part 2 of our summit today, this afternoon at 1 p.m. Eastern, so just under an hour from now. And so I'd like you to, I'd invite you to join us for that. So we've got another great group of panelists talking about some of the green jobs that you might not have ever even heard of. So 1 p.m. Eastern, and yeah, I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in today, and have a great day.